The example of the Irish Revolution and the Irish struggle for independence was seen as an inspiration by a very diverse group of people struggling for self-determination or for equal rights across the globe. One of the biggest enthusiasts for the Irish Revolution was Marcus Garvey, who was a central figure in African and black nationalism in the early 20th century. Garvey really saw Ireland as the most important struggle that was taking place in the world. He was from the West Indies, so he'd been grown up governed by Britain, and he saw the Irish struggle as vital. He renamed his headquarters in Harlem and New York Liberty Hall, due to the inspiration from Liberty Hall in Dublin. He constantly talked about in his newspaper, The Negro World, about the Irish example, and he believed that black nationalists who are struggling for racial equality should look at the Irish example and, if possible, ally themselves with the Irish in this struggle. You also then have a range of people like Cyril Briggs, again from the West Indies, leader of the African Blood Brotherhood, a very left-wing black nationalist group, who sees the Irish struggle as well as tremendously important, regards it as the most heroic struggle taking place in the world at that time. And also leading African-American thinkers like W.E.B. Du Bois and A. Philip Randolph are also discussing Ireland, being very positive about the struggle for Irish independence. But there's a bit of a difference between their view and that of Garvey and Briggs, in that A. Philip Randolph and Du Bois were African Americans, and in the United States the relationship between the Irish and African Americans was often very violent. Irish Americans were regarded by many African Americans as often their worst enemies in many American cities. So they are more reluctant to embrace the Irish cause in America, but they are very supportive of the idea of Irish independence internationally. The Egyptians and the Indians are also very enthusiastic about Ireland. They see the Irish struggle for independence taking place at the heart of the British Empire. And in London and in Berlin and in New York and San Francisco, Indian and Egyptian nationalists make contact with Irish revolutionaries, and people like Eamon de Valera, Liam Mellows, Patrick McCartan and so on speak at rallies in favour of Indian independence in the United States. There's large contingents of Indian nationalists at Irish Republican demonstrations in America. There are also contacts between these revolutionaries and the IRA. For example, in 1921, a representative of what's called the Egyptian Revolutionary Forces approaches the IRA in Britain, and they have a discussion about the best way for Egyptian revolutionaries to pursue a campaign of mass agitation and also guerrilla struggle in Egypt itself. So these kind of connections are being made between oppressed peoples essentially across the globe, and the League of Oppressed Peoples in the United States is an organisation that includes among its sponsors people like Harry Boland and Liam Mellows, and also then between contacts of these various groups in Europe and in North America. Also in the United States, you find, once the Irish Republican campaign gets underway, a lot of enthusiasm among Jewish Americans for the Irish example. Among those who embrace Zionism, the struggle for freedom in Ireland is seen as similar to the struggle for the attainment of a Jewish nation. So at the Irish Race Convention in Philadelphia in early 1919, Rabbi Joseph Krauskopf says, "The Irish will be free and rulers of Ireland, just as the Jews will be free and rulers of Palestine." You also have very many activists in left-wing American politics who are of Jewish extraction, who are active in supporting Irish independence. And when the Dáil begins to try and raise funds in the United States, what's noticeable is that obviously its target is the Irish American audience or constituency, but they also are given donations from a very diverse range of people in the United States, including particularly Jewish Americans. And it's commented on at the time that in New York and in Boston, Chicago and other cities, Jewish Americans are particularly generous in their donations to the Dáil bond and funding for the Irish Republic. And again, turn out in very large numbers in the winter of 1920, when the widow of Terence McSweeney and Terence McSweeney's sisters visit the United States. The McSweeney hunger strike has a huge impact across the globe, and you again see Jewish Americans, Indian nationalists, Egyptians and so on, and African Americans turning out to honour Terence McSweeney. Now this is a very complicated story, because at the same time that this is happening, sometimes in the United States people like Eamon de Valera, but also Harry Boland and Mary McSweeney and others use the argument that Ireland is the last white nation to be held in subjection. They use this argument that the Irish should be given their freedom because they are in fact a white nation. De Valera actually says that in a speech in Birmingham, Alabama, in the southern United States, where nobody in the audience would have any difficulty interpreting what that type of language might mean. So in many ways, Irish Republicans are an inspiration to other oppressed groups across the globe, but they're also pragmatic and very often tailor their argument depending on what audience they're speaking to.